Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Reading Reddit. Today, we're checking out r/pro revenge, a thread dedicated to people that got wronged in some way, but got epic revenge. Don't forget to leave a like on the video, do all that cool stuff, and thank you guys very much for supporting this little segment. Yeah. This one was posted by the Kung Fu Panda. Trick me out of a laptop, you'll give me your car. 13 years ago, I was in my late teens, living on my own, and really struggled to live financially. One of the few possessions I had was an old laptop. My laptop had stopped working properly, and while I'm fairly proficient in using a computer, I had no idea about fixing them. I did a bit of searching on the internet, but couldn't get it working, so I asked my stepdad to take a look. He has a quick look and says it's screwed, but he'll take it off my hands if I don't want it, so I said, sure, if it's broken, then it's no good to me. 10 minutes later, I walk into the room and he's using it. I asked him if he fixed it, and he says, yeah, thanks for the laptop. I was obviously mad. My mom says she wasn't getting involved, and his only response was that he did a quick internet search to find a fix, and I could have done the same. I was broke, and he took one of my only possessions, even though he had a PC and a laptop already. A few months later, I was visiting my mom and stepdad when I had an idea. While I am useless with computers, I am very competent with mechanics, specifically Audis, and my stepdad had a 2001 Audi A3. Before coming in the house, I went under his car and unplugged the oil lever sensor and vac line for the turbo. Later on that day, he went to go to the shop or something. When he started the car, it threw up oil warning lights on the dash and wouldn't boost, so he turned it off and had a look of concern on his face. I went out to ask him what's up, and he said something gone majorly wrong. He said something along the lines of catastrophic turbo failure or engine failure. He's already spent quite a bit on repairs and didn't want to spend any more money on it, so spoke to my mom about cutting his losses and scrapping it. I asked how much it's worth at the scrapyard, and he says $100. So I ever so graciously offer $120 to take it off his hands to maybe part it out, which he accepts. He signed over the title and wrote a receipt of purchase and handed the keys over. I walked outside, lifted the bonnet, pretended to look at my phone for a minute, went into the car and plugged the vac line and oil sensor back in, fired it straight up and drove around the block. When I got back, I gave him the thumbs up and said it's all fine now. His mouth was wide open and he was mega mad. And my reply was, you could have found the solution. You could have found the solution too with a quick internet search. He tried arguing that it wasn't fair, and if it's working, then I can't just take his car. But I said he didn't have a problem tricking me on my laptop, and he's already signed the car over to me, so tough luck. My mom kind of laughed and said she's not getting involved, and it was his own fault. I still have the car to this day, and it's practically in showroom condition and runs sweet. And here's a picture of it. Nice. Now that is some pro revenge right there. God. First of all, man, it took his laptop just because the dad was a super douche at the beginning, but then taking his whole car. I don't know whether or not this story's true. Some people have left in the comments on the previous ones, especially the entitled parents, that not all the stories are true, like they've been known to be fake. Don't care. As long as it's entertaining, I'm going to pretend like these are real. And if this is real, nice. Very nice. Now, the next pro revenge is posted by Merc35802. Senior manager gets me fired. I turn things around and get her job and salary, plus see her break down and then let her know exactly how I got my revenge. All right. I was hired by a company as an assistant manager, a job I was well qualified for. The owner is rarely on site, and he owns several businesses. This company is run by a general manager who hired me, but who works mostly second shift, and who I therefore would have little daily contact with since I was hired for first shift. I was assigned to Ava for training. Ava was my manager and had been with the company 5 years. I trained with her for a few days, and then I was on my own, though she and I had overlapping shifts and would see each other a few days a week. We were friendly, but not close. After a few months, I was doing well at my job, and had even gotten some new procedures adopted to help boost sales. Ava began to act resentful. She would correct me for small things and took any opportunity to remind me that she had trained me. It didn't matter to me. She wasn't my boss. I reported the GM. So I mostly just ignored her. And what I didn't know was that Ava was not just tight with the GM, but they had worked together on another place for 10 years before this one. One day at shift in, GM asks to talk, tells me it's not working out, and says I'm still making mistakes at 6 months that I shouldn't be. Ask for examples. A few of them were petty matters Ava had mentioned, but most of them were just not true. I tried to argue, but it was clear that I was set up. I decided to reach out to the owner since I had nothing to lose. He was sympathetic, but said he relies on GM to run the business and had to support her decision. Then he mentions that if things hadn't been so bad between me and Ava, it probably could have been worked out. That's when I knew she was behind me being fired from a job I needed, really liked, and was making great money, and I vowed to get revenge. I started searching for her online info. In less than 1 hour, I uncovered gold thanks to one of those pay services. About 3 months prior, Ava was arrested and charged with a DUI in a neighboring state. The court records show that she had a hearing coming up in a few weeks. That was enough to get her fired. It affects a professional license she and I had to have as management. For state law, license holders must report criminal charges to the licensing board. And in the case of a DUI arrest, licenses are typically suspended pending trial. I called the owner and told him what I had discovered. It was news to him. I guess since it was out of state, Ava was keeping it a secret. Maybe she was hoping to get let off the charges. The next day, the owner called and said Ava was fired. He thanked me for telling him about her DUI, apologized for how I was fired, and offered me Ava's position and salary. He asked me to come in the next morning and meet with him and to cover Ava's shift. I accepted. That alone was sweetly satisfying revenge, but what happened next was the icing on the cake. I got to work extra early, met the owner and GM, and we all agreed to start fresh. Cool. It was still an hour before opening, and I was in the back of the place when I heard the front door chime. When I came out a few minutes later, Ava was there, tears flowing, begging the owner for her job back. She obviously didn't know I was there, because when she saw me, her whole body seized and her shocked expression was priceless. I walked right by her, staring her down with a crappy grin, and went outside. Ava came out a minute later and wouldn't make eye contact. As she walked away, I said, "Good luck on the 23rd. That was her court date. Hey, Ava, get wrecked. Oh my God, that is one thing I don't miss. I do not miss about working a normal job, and I'm so grateful for what I'm able to do. Workspace politics. Oh, they're so petty and just stupid. Now it makes me happy. I like that one. That was good. Leave a comment down below if you got some crappy workspace politics you've had to deal with. But man, I like the favoritism, everything, like just all the things that go into working a job to where it comes down to, it doesn't matter how good you are at the job. It matters if your management likes you. I absolutely hated that. This next one is from Bama Fan for Jesus. Roll Tide. A newly hired youth minister got me kicked out of church for no reason. I found out he had been screwing a deacon's wife, and I helped the deacon ruin his life. Woo! About 6 to 7 years ago, I was a ministerial student at a conservative Christian college. I had attended the same Bible-believing church since I was a small child. It was large, about 1,000 members, but not a mega church. I played piano for youth choir, preached at the children's church service, which was held at the church chapel at the same time as the adult service, drove the church's bus to pick up unchurched children, etc., and ad infinitum. I did all this for free, not even getting reimbursed for expenses. During my senior year in college, we got a new minister of music education and youth. This guy was as charming as an ice cream sundae with the razor blades in it. I'll call him Mr. Charming. All the deacons and their wives thought he walked on water. He was an authoritarian butthole. In his first meeting with the church youth group, he announced that he had been hired to straighten up the youth group. One of his favorite sayings was, "When I tell my disciples jump, the only question they get to ask are, how high and how far?" The adults loved him, and the youth hated him. Within a few weeks, half of the high school and college students, i.e. all those without parents in the church, had quit coming to church. Most youth directors would have gotten in trouble over this, but he had the audacity to proclaim in front of the entire congregation in the Sunday morning worship service that he eliminated all the thorny ground from the youth group, and the pastor and all the deacons loved him for it. He didn't waste any time going after what he really wanted, the pastor's job. And the pastor, whom I call Pastor T, was about 60 years old. Within a few weeks of Mr. Charming's arrival, rumors started circulating about Pastor T's health. He was an avid runner and cyclist, and that he just didn't seem to be as mentally sharp as he used to be. He frequently quoted long Bible passages from the pulpit entirely from memory without misstating a single word, sometimes in Greek or Hebrew. Worst of all, however, was the accusation that he was really too liberal for the church. In my denomination, it's a kiss of death to even be suspected of being a liberal. Don't even, note here, don't even get me started on the separation of church and state because, like, your political views in the church matter. Anyway, sorry. None of these accusations made any sense, but people kept talking about them. I have no idea why the pastor didn't find out. Or maybe he did find out and was just too scared to do anything about it. In some denominations, like Catholic or Methodist, the denomination assign pastors and priests. Not my church's denomination. Each church calls the minister. This guarantees that every pastor always walks a razor's edge. The slightest slip and you're out. You don't even have to slip. Maybe you even do the right thing and it still offends enough people. It doesn't take many, just a handful if they hate you enough. Then you're out. Or maybe, like Pastor T, some creep just lies about you and gets your job. And since the church often owns your house, the parsonage or the manse, your entire family is suddenly homeless and destitute. Then I become a target. I still don't know why. A couple of months after starting to work for my church, Mr. Charming called me and informed me that my services were no longer needed at youth choir, children's church, bus ministry, anywhere. In fact, he said he did not even want me to participate in any of those functions at all, not even go to the Sunday morning worship service. I later found out that members of his family had been hired by the church at very nice rates of pay to perform these functions that I've been doing for free. His wife got paid more for playing a beat-up piano at the 1-hour youth choir rehearsal than the main organist pianist got paid for playing adult choir rehearsal, plus Sunday mornings and Sunday evenings when the church choir sang. The wife could barely pick out the notes on a piano. This lady radiates bitterness, resentment, and repressed anger. But she rarely said anything. She just sat there and glared, which was somehow even creepier than when she spoke. I was very hurt emotionally, so I dropped by Pastor T's office and tearfully asked him what I had done wrong. I couldn't get a straight answer, except he told me that people are saying things about me and that if I wanted to get a good recommendation from him to our denomination's minister school, I'd better shut up and do what you're told. So I started asking all my church friends what people were saying about me. Everyone said, well, I didn't want to tell you and I don't believe it, but here's what I heard. According to the rumor mill, I'd gotten my girlfriend pregnant and forced her to have an abortion. I hadn't even had a girlfriend since junior high, and I'd been arrested for possession of marijuana, and my dad had to pay a bunch of money to hush it up. I didn't even know what pot looked like. There were other rumors, but you get the idea. I did what Pastor T told me to. I never darkened the door of that church again, except once, months later, see below. It hurt like hell. I devoted my life to that church since I was a little kid, but I had to have Pastor T's recommendation to get into the minister's school I wanted to go to, and the pain was unbearable just driving by there, so I decided to keep my distance. But I started thinking about Mr. Charming. Anyone who was that evil had to have a past, and it probably wasn't a good one. I knew that just before working at my church. He had worked at a large church in the same denomination in a small town about 50 miles away. That church was actually about twice the size of my church. So he had moved from a big church to the same job at a smaller church. A bad career move? Running away from something? There was something rotten in Denmark, and it smelled like an opportunity for me. As luck would have it, one of my uncles and his family lived in that same small town, although none of my family attended Mr. Charming's formal church. So I called one of my cousins, told her my story, and enlisted her as a co-conspirator. I'll call her Anne. The next Sunday morning, Anne and I attended Sunday school at the morning worship at Mr. Charming's old church. Although Anne had never been a member of that church, it was a small town where everyone knew everyone, so she knew most of the people there. She started asking about Mr. Charming and got an earful. Every one of her friends said that Mr. Charming is a world-class creep. He would flirt with and even make suggestive comments to all the girls in the youth group, even those in junior high. He was 40 plus years old and had a wife and 3 children of his own. And then there was the touching. Never anything obvious or illegal, but he loved to put his hands all over the young ladies, whenever their parents weren't around. Blah, gross. But just like at my formal church, the adults loved him because he kept the youth in line. Our investigation went on for several weeks. I kept a low profile to not arouse suspicion. Mostly, I just stood around, ate donuts, drank coffee, and talked about football. Anne did most of the work because she knew so many people, and it was practically natural for her to attend church in her hometown, even if it was not the church she usually attended. After church was over, we would go to her house and have a delicious Sunday lunch cooked by my aunt, and then write down everything we had learned. By then, Ann's whole family were in on the investigation. They were as angry as I was about the way I'd been treated. And our weekly report made interesting lunchtime conversation. Within a few weeks, I was sure that all I had to do was drive a few of these young ladies and their parents, friends of my aunt and uncle, down to my old church, let them tell the stories to the parents of the few girls in the youth group, and Mr. Charming would become Mr. Unemployed. But it kept getting better and better, so Ann and I kept digging. And I really wanted to keep a low profile if I could, because I didn't want to piss off Pastor T any more than I had to. He knew a lot of people in the denomination, and he could easily ruin my ministerial career before it even started. Finally, after a month or so, Ann grabbed me by the sleeve and said, "You've got to hear this." She introduced me to a well-dressed, very large guy, maybe 30, 35 years old. I'll call him Fred. We slipped off into a Sunday school room where we would not be overheard. It turned out that Mr. Charming had a multi-year affair with Fred's wife. Fred had kept his cool when he found out, talked to his lawyer, and had spent months gathering evidence. Text messages, voicemails, emails, even photos and videos with Fred's wife and Mr. Charming in them. Apparently, Mr. Charming got stimulated by watching videos of himself doing the wild thing with Fred's wife. Oh, God. Then, Mr. Charming would send the videos to Fred's wife, and they would both have cyber sex while texting each other. Later, they would hook up the old-fashioned way and make more videos. Finally, Fred confronted his wife. She denied everything, but the evidence was just too much. Fred told her he wanted a divorce, full custody of the children, their house, his retirement money, his business, her engagement and wedding rings, everything, even the dog. She hired a lawyer, but laws and courts being what they are in this rural Alabama country, her lawyer told her that if the judge saw the videos, she'd be lucky if she ended up in a homeless shelter with all of her worldly possessions under the bunk of a garbage sack. Then Fred turned his attention to Mr. Charming. Fred still sincerely loved his wife, and he was convinced that Mr. Charming had deliberately ruined his marriage. Taking Mr. Charming to court, suing him for loss of consortium, and otherwise making him legally miserable would take too long. This is the rural Deep South. Many people around here prefer a more direct approach. In rural countries, the police and any jury of your peers will probably include people that have known you since kindergarten. So if you have a good reason for your actions and you aren't too stupid about it, there are things that you can do. Fred scheduled an appointment with Mr. Charming in this church office, who did not suspect a thing because Fred was a deacon and his children were in the church youth group. Remember that I said Fred was big? 6'6" at least, 300 pounds, and if there was an inch of fat on him, he hit it well. Looked like he could pull up a 100-foot oak tree by the roots without breaking a sweat. Fred told me that he brought several friends with him and, of course, the videos. One friend blocked the door, another unplugged the phone, and a third stood behind Mr. Charming and encouraged him to stay seated in his chair. Fred made Mr. Charming watch about 10 minutes of one of the videos. Ooh, he probably got excited about that. Then calmly said, "I'm going to stand here and watch you pack up your stuff. You're going to walk out of this building and never show your freaking face in this town again, or we'll be back." Mr. Charming did as he was told. A month later, he had a new job at another church, my old church, and started ruining a whole nother set of lives, including mine. Fred actually did not know where Mr. Charming had gone. He had been led to believe that Mr. Charming had moved out of state. He was surprised, gratified, and angered to learn that this scumbag was only 50 miles away. This had all happened just a few months before. Fred was still deeply in love with his wife. They were getting counseling, and he hoped that they could save his marriage. But his hatred for Mr. Charming was still fulminating. Like Mount St. Helens a few minutes before the explosion. He presented such a face of restraint, rage, and vindictiveness that scared me, and I wasn't even the one that he was mad at. The next day, Monday, I drove back up there and gave him a copy of the directory at my old church. It had home addresses, phone numbers, and email addresses for pretty much every member of the church. I showed him the page that listed all the deacons and other church leaders, and I marked some of the church's major financial donors. I explained my situation with Pastor T and asked that my name not be mentioned. "No problem," he said. The next Sunday, I could not resist visiting my old church to see how things were going. Mr. Charming was nowhere to be seen, nor was any explanation given about what happened to him. One weird thing, though, the pastor looked scared crapless. His voice, usually resonant, loud, and almost musically baritone, trembled during the whole sermon. I slipped in just before the service started and made a point of sitting in the very front row, center pew. The look on his face when he saw me was worth all my trouble. I didn't know it at the time, but Fred had gotten right to work and done a very thorough job. The whole church had gotten multiple anonymous emails with photos and videos of Mr. Charming and Fred's wife in various, well, compromising positions and states of undress. Deacons and donors got emails plus express packages just for good measure. Mr. Charming and Pastor T had been left out. They didn't know anything until the phone calls started pouring in. After the worship service, it did not take long for my church friends to figure out why I was there. It was very gratifying. I was something of a hero, although I kept swearing that I had no idea what they were talking about. Things continued to blow up in my former church for months afterwards. Both Pastor T and the pastor of Mr. Charming's old church almost lost their jobs because they had lied to my old church's committee of deacons who had recommended hiring Mr. Charming about why Mr. Charming had left his old job. But somehow they managed to stay in the pulpits at their churches, although a lot of church members left my former church, which caused some financial problems. There was talk of legal action for sending unsolicited porn to little old ladies and other people in the church, but nobody was ever able to prove that Fred did it. I don't think they tried very hard. After all, his wife was in the videos and photos. Speaking of which, I guess that's not very good for his marriage counseling. But anyway, both churches really did not want this to become a court case because of Mr. Charming's trysts and the fact that he had spent years screwing a deacon's wife while he had unlimited, unsupervised access to dozens of church youth would then become a matter of public record. So they hushed it up. I never saw Pastor T again. I had lost all the trust and respect that I had for him, and I was sure that he had figured out that I was somehow connected to the whole fiasco. So my chance of having a preacher career in my denomination were precisely zero. By that time, being a pastor, like Pastor T, was the last thing I wanted anyway. I withdrew my application to minister school and eventually completed a doctorate in archaeology at a different grad school. Magna cum laude. I've been teaching at a large public university in Midwest of USA with summer gigs and archaeological digs in Europe, and I am very happy. One last, very gratifying event, the reason for this post, all that happened 6 or 7 years ago. Fast forward to last March. I went to pick up a friend at a large downtown urban bus station in the US. Everyone hates this place. Not only is it crowded, it's poorly maintained and filthy. It smells like spoiled garbage mixed with diesel exhaust and seldom clean public restrooms. A friend's bus was late. I stopped by the newsstand to get myself a soda and a candy bar. Who do you think was restocking the shelves? Mr. Charming. I just sat across the newsstand and enjoyed my drink and snack. He recognized me, then turned away. I just sat and watched him, restocking shelves full of porno mags and junk food. Revenge is a feast that is best enjoyed cold. My goodness, what a freaking story. Holy crap. Wow. Talk about some church drama. Man. Much like freaking work politics. You got those church politics as well. And they all suck. Thank you guys very much for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave a nice comment. Do all that cool stuff. And we'll see you guys in the next video. Stay toasty, my friends.